Let's speak to Michael Fabricant, a Conservative MP for Lichfield, who, as you can see, is live outside for Parliament for us this afternoon. Michael, as always, thank you. Someone said today the dogs on the street around where you are knew what Chris Pincher was like. Did you? It does seem that lots of your colleagues did.
Well, I think some of my colleagues may or may not have had suspicions, but, he's my next-door neighbour. He represents Tamworth, and I can't say that, it was particularly obvious to me. This place is a rumour mill behind me, and lots of people are accused of lots of things, and some even worse, and maybe it's just me, but I sort of don't always assume that what you hear as gossip is true.
Aside from that, and as you rightly point out, these are just allegations, but frankly, did the Prime Minister act too late? Was he too slow to remove the whip, given that it's happened much more quickly in the past with other MPs?
Well, I think with other MPs, there was a very, very clear case. It was very, very black and white. It wasn't black and white. As soon as, however, a formal complaint was made, the Prime Minister did remove the whip. You know what? If the Prime Minister has two weaknesses, it's one, believing that you're innocent until you're proven guilty, and the second one is loyalty. And, Chris Pincher had been loyal to him, and I guess he wanted to be loyal to Chris Pincher. But it would have been equally wrong, to condemn Chris Pincher, take away the whip and all the rest of it before even a complaint was made. One of the issues which has been in the newspaper, which Chris Pincher is alleged to have been involved with, was not only denied by Chris Pincher, but then was subsequently denied by the victim. So some of it you really do have to take with a pinch of salt.
But this was also a man who had previously lost his job in government because of similar allegations. And additionally, what we believe happened last week was witnessed by one of your colleagues, by another Conservative MP.
Yeah, that's right. Don't forget, not that I'm condoning it, but the guy was drunk. He had real problems and still does, Chris Pincher, on that front. And what I do know is that Chris Pincher has now been referred to a clinical psychiatrist, and he is getting treatment for this. It's just such a shame that it didn't happen sooner. Shame for those who were the victims, and a shame also for Chris Pincher, who's a decent guy. And one of the saddest things of all, I think, is that Chris Pincher has got rather embroiled with those people who are very, very anti Boris Johnson, and are now using Chris Pincher, the same old people who voted against Boris Johnson because of Brexit and all the rest of it in the Conservative Party, and are now using Chris Pincher as an excuse to attack Boris again.
That is interesting, isn't it? I think there's no doubt about that, though, of course, Chris Pincher was quite heavily involved in trying to maintain support for the Prime Minister, wasn't he? But frankly, isn't this a sign that his enemies are again circling? The Prime Minister is a weakened figure in many regards.
Well, I think Tom was saying earlier on that he's a weakened figure. Look, Prime Ministers go through rough patches, particularly in the middle of a governmental term. And there's no question that Boris is going through a rough patch. But I don't know anybody who's got the imagination that Boris has to have achieved what he's done, not only with Brexit, not only with the vaccine programme and COVID, but also with the Ukraine war. And I think that Boris will get through it. And I think when people start to really analyse what has happened with Chris Pincher, precisely who actually were the victims, and which allegations have been made which actually are not true at all. And in fact, as I said earlier on, at least one victim, or someone who's been identified as a victim, has since said, well, actually, the event didn't happen. I think eventually, people will begin to take this whole thing in perspective, and we will move on. And of course, we've only heard today about the BBC having to make a massive apology over one of their Radio 1 DJs. A separate issue, but it's one that isn't confined to Parliament.